Once upon a time, nestled at the edge of a vast, whispering forest, lived a sweet little girl. Everyone in her village adored her, but no one loved her more than her grandmother. This kind old woman had once sewn her a beautiful little riding cape of the finest red velvet. The cape suited the girl so perfectly that she wore it everywhere she went, and soon everyone simply called her Little Red Riding Hood. One sunny morning, her mother called to her, holding a basket filled with delicious things. "Little Red Riding Hood," she said, her voice warm but firm, "your grandmother is feeling unwell. I have packed this basket with a fresh loaf of bread, a bottle of fine wine, and some sweet butter cakes. Please, take it to her, for it will surely help her recover her strength." Her mother's brow furrowed with concern. "The path through the forest is direct, but you must be careful. Walk straight to your grandmother's cottage, and do not stray from the path. Do not talk to strangers, for the woods can hold dangers you do not yet understand. Promise me you will be a good girl." Little Red Riding Hood, her eyes bright with earnestness, nodded enthusiastically. "Of course, Mother. I will be very careful. I will go straight to grandmother's and give her your love." With a kiss on her cheek and the heavy basket settled on her arm, she waved goodbye and set off toward the deep, green woods. The forest was a place of enchanting beauty. Sunlight dappled through the thick canopy of leaves, dancing on the mossy ground like scattered gold coins. Birds sang their cheerful melodies from high branches, and the air was thick with the earthy scent of damp soil and wildflowers. For a while, Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother's words, keeping her feet firmly on the well-trodden path. Her red cape was a bright splash of color against the endless green and brown of the woods. She hummed a happy tune as she walked, thinking of how pleased her grandmother would be with the wonderful treats. However, the forest was full of temptations. Brightly colored butterflies flitted just beyond the path, their wings like tiny jewels. She saw clusters of wildflowers, more beautiful than any she had seen in the village gardens, their petals a vibrant tapestry of blues, yellows, and purples. She thought to herself, "Grandmother is ill and weak. A beautiful bouquet of fresh flowers would surely lift her spirits even more than the cake and wine." The thought seemed so good and so kind that her mother's warning began to fade from her mind. What harm could there be in stepping off the path for just a moment? The sun was still high in the sky, and she was a fast walker. Surely, she could gather a few flowers and still reach her grandmother's cottage long before dusk. As she bent down to pick a particularly lovely bluebell, a shadow fell over her. She looked up and saw a large wolf standing before her, his fur the color of ash, and his eyes a startling, intelligent yellow. He smiled, showing a row of very sharp, very white teeth. Little Red Riding Hood, who had never seen a wolf before and did not know what wicked creatures they could be, felt no fear. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said, his voice as smooth as honey. "Good day, Mr. Wolf," she replied politely, curtsying slightly. "And where are you off to so early in the morning, with such a heavy basket?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the woven hamper. "I am on my way to my grandmother's house," she explained innocently. "She is not feeling well, and I am bringing her some bread, wine, and cake to make her feel better." The wolf's ears twitched with interest. "And where does your grandmother live, my dear?" he inquired, his tone deceptively casual. "Oh, it's not much farther," Little Red Riding Hood said, pointing with her small hand. "Her cottage is just beyond those 3 large oak trees, the one with the hazel bushes growing all around it. You can't miss it." The wolf's cunning mind began to race. He saw an opportunity for not 1, but 2 delicious meals. He walked beside her for a short while, pointing out the wonders of the forest she had been missing. "Look," he said, gesturing with his snout. "See how the sunbeams dance among the trees? And listen to the beautiful songs the birds are singing just for you. You walk along as if you are late for school, but there is so much beauty to enjoy here." Little Red Riding Hood looked around and realized he was right. The forest was even more magical than she had first thought. "I suppose I could look around a little," she mused. The wolf smiled his sharp-toothed smile. "I have an idea," he sighed slyly. "Let us have a little race. I will take this path over here, and you can continue on yours. We will see who arrives at your grandmother's cottage first." He winked, as if sharing a grand secret. "I am sure a quick-footed girl like you can beat an old wolf like me." Little Red Riding Hood, delighted by the idea of a game, agreed at once. The wolf bounded away, disappearing into the thick undergrowth, taking the most direct route to the cottage. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood, forgetting all about any race, began to wander deeper and deeper into the woods, chasing butterflies and gathering an ever-growing bouquet of wildflowers, completely oblivious to the passage of time and the wicked plan that was already in motion. The wolf, wasting no time, ran as fast as his 4 powerful legs could carry him. He arrived at the grandmother's cottage, which stood exactly where Little Red Riding Hood had described it. He trotted up to the wooden door and knocked gently. "Who is there?" called a weak, frail voice from inside. The wolf, disguising his own deep growl, pitched his voice high and sweet to mimic the little girl's. "It is I, Little Red Riding Hood," he squeaked. "I have brought you bread, wine, and cake from Mother." The grandmother, too ill to get out of bed, called out, "Oh, you are too kind, my dear child. I am too weak to come to the door. Just lift the latch. It is not locked." The wolf's yellow eyes gleamed. He lifted the heavy iron latch with his snout. The door creaked open, and he slipped inside without a single word. He went straight to the old woman's bed and, in one swift, terrible motion, he gobbled her up whole. Then, his wicked task only half complete, he rummaged through the grandmother's wardrobe. He found one of her nightgowns and a frilly sleeping cap. He dressed himself in the clothes, pulled the cap down low over his furry ears, and climbed into the bed. He drew the curtains around the bed frame, leaving just a small gap, and pulled the covers right up to his chin, waiting patiently for the main course to arrive. After what felt like a very long time, when her arms were overflowing with flowers and she could not possibly carry another one, Little Red Riding Hood finally remembered her grandmother. She hurried back to the path and ran the rest of the way to the cottage. She was surprised to find the door slightly ajar. A strange feeling of unease crept over her as she stepped inside. The cottage was unusually quiet and dark. "Good morning, grandmother," she called out, but there was no reply. She walked hesitantly toward the bed. The curtains were drawn, and everything felt different, somehow unsettling. She pulled back the curtain and peered in. Her grandmother was lying in bed, with her cap pulled far down over her face, looking very peculiar indeed. "Oh, grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood said, her voice trembling slightly. "What big ears you have." The voice that answered was gravelly and strange, not at all like her grandmother's. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf rasped. "But, grandmother," she continued, stepping a little closer, "what big eyes you have." The figure in the bed shifted. "All the better to see you with, my dear." A nervous shiver ran down the girl's spine. "And grandmother, what big hands you have," she whispered. "Chiff," she whispered. "All the better to hug you with, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood took one last, fearful step forward. "But oh, grandmother," she stammered, "what a terribly big mouth you have." The wolf threw back the covers, revealing his monstrous form. "All the better to eat you with," he roared. And with that, he leaped from the bed and swallowed poor Little Red Riding Hood in a single gulp. With his stomach now full with 2 satisfying meals, the wicked wolf felt incredibly sleepy. He belched loudly, patted his swollen belly, and climbed back into the grandmother's comfortable bed. Within moments, he was fast asleep, and his snores were so loud that they rattled the windows of the little cottage. It just so happened that a huntsman was passing by the cottage at that very moment. He heard the thunderous snoring and thought it was very strange. "My goodness," he thought to himself. "The old woman is snoring like a troop of soldiers. I had better check to see if she is all right." He peeked through the window and saw not the old grandmother, but the great gray wolf lying in her bed. Huntsman recognized him at once. It was a notorious wolf he had been tracking for many weeks. "So, this is where you have been hiding, you old sinner," he muttered, raising his rifle. But then he had a second thought. Perhaps the wolf had swallowed the grandmother whole, and she might still be saved. He set down his rifle and instead took out his large hunting shears. Creeping quietly into the cottage, he stood over the sleeping beast. With a deep breath, he took the shears and began to snip open the wolf's bulging stomach. With the very first snip, a flash of red appeared. After a second snip, a little girl's set popped out. "Oh, thank you," cried Little Red Riding Hood. It was so dark and frightening inside the wolf. The huntsman carefully cut a larger opening, and Little Red Riding Hood jumped out, safe and sound. A moment later, the old grandmother emerged as well, weak and gasping for air, but alive. The three of them quickly devised a plan. Little Red Riding Hood ran outside and gathered several large, heavy stones from the garden. They filled the wolf's belly with the stones until it was heavy and bulging once more. Then, the huntsman and grandmother carefully sewed the skin back up. When the wolf finally awoke from his deep sleep, he felt terribly thirsty and his stomach ached with a strange weight. He staggered out of the cottage and stumbled towards the well in the garden to get a drink. But the stones in his stomach were so heavy that they unbalanced him. He leaned too far over the edge of the well, lost his footing, and plunged headfirst into the deep, dark water, where he drowned. The huntsman, the grandmother, and Little Red Riding Hood were overjoyed. The huntsman skinned the wolf and took the magnificent pelt home as a trophy. The grandmother ate the bread and cake and drank the wine that Little Red Riding Hood had brought, and she soon felt her strength return. As for Little Red Riding Hood, she looked at her grandmother and the kind huntsman and made a solemn vow. From that day forward, she would never again stray from the path or talk to strangers in the woods, always remembering the very important lesson her mother had tried to teach her.